Welcome back to another Explainer. I'm stepping into my forensic legal analyst shoes today because we've got a heavily redacted Commission of Inquiry transcript to unpack. We are looking at some serious, sworn, in-camera testimony that points to prima facie evidence of systemic corruption right inside South African law enforcement. We're talking about elite policing units allegedly manipulating statutory protocols behind closed doors. Let's get right into it.
So our main source material today is this sworn testimony from June 2026. The witness is completely anonymized for obvious reasons. We're just going to call him Witness I. He's a team leader for TOMS, the Tactical Operations Management Section, and SONEB, handling high-level organized crime. And let me tell you, the sheer volume of allegations in this docket gives us an incredibly unprecedented insider's look at some alleged institutional subversion.
Here is how we're going to break this testimony down today. First, we'll look at the anatomy of a rather suspicious drug bust. Second, we'll examine a glaring procedural anomaly with an inquiry number. Third, we'll see how an illicit operation was allegedly legitimized. And finally, we'll touch on extortion and interference from the top brass.
Let's start with Section 1, the anatomy of a drug bust, focusing on the 9th of July 2021 scene in Aeroton.
Okay, picture this. It's the morning of July 9th, 2021. In the industrial area of Aeroton, Johannesburg. Witness I gets called to a scene by a Sergeant Fakula, and the scale here is just massive. A truck transporting a boat from the Durban harbor gets intercepted in Gauteng, and what's hidden inside? 1 ton of cocaine. 1 ton! In South African narcotics enforcement, this is an absolute mammoth interdiction. But as Witness I testified, how this all went down was fundamentally irregular.
Because when Witness I shows up, expecting to take charge of a highly sensitive, multi-million ZAR international drug interdiction, he doesn't find the standard specialized narcotics guys handling the bust. No. Instead, he finds this completely bizarre, uncoordinated group of officers. We've got a K9 unit sergeant, a ward officer from the National Investigation Unit, literally a desk cop from a local station in Zonkizi, and even a Gauteng traffic chief. It makes absolutely no sense for this specific assembly of people to be managing a bust of this magnitude.
And guys, the irregularities didn't stop there. Before Witness I even got there, 27 bags of cocaine had already been physically yanked out of the truck and loaded onto an unmarked bakkie. No crime scene photographers, no standard protocols in place, nothing. And when he asked them how this happened, they gave this shockingly vague excuse, basically claiming that when they opened the truck, the bags simply fell out. Just fell right out into their unmarked vehicle. From a forensic standpoint, that is an immediate, massive red flag for evidence tampering.
Which brings us to Section 2, the inquiry number anomaly. This is a glaring procedural mismatch.
So to officially process this seizure, these officers had to attach it to a CAS inquiry number. They decided to use an old one, 6/8/2020. But during cross-examination, the commission advocates completely tore this apart. You see, that 2020 inquiry file explicitly targeted Tanzanian nationals smuggling yaupé and heroin from Mozambique, using local Uber drivers to distribute it in Gauteng.
Think about how legally absurd this is under the South African Criminal Procedure Act. On one hand, you have a 2020 street-level heroin and yaupé case involving Uber drivers. On the other hand, you've got a massive 2021 seaport seizure of 1 ton of cocaine. They are entirely different illicit goods, different origins, different suspects. Procedurally linking these two makes absolutely zero sense.
Naturally, the commission advocates zeroed in on this anomaly and asked a very pointed, critical question. Why force a square peg into a round hole? Why on earth would experienced cops try so desperately to attach a fresh, massive cocaine bust to a completely unrelated, year-old heroin inquiry? You really have to ask yourself, what were they trying to hide?
Moving on to Section 3, legitimizing an illicit operation. This was really the climax of the cross-examination.
The advocates at the commission didn't just ask questions. They came armed with a highly detailed, incredibly damning theory about what was actually going down in that Aeroton industrial park. Advocate Kamalo SC looked Witness Ira right in the eye and suggested his late arrival and the use of that bogus 2020 inquiry number was no accident. It was a calculated move specifically designed to legitimize an entirely unlawful operation where rogue cops were actually trying to steal the drugs for themselves.
And they laid out the facts brilliantly on the record. First, the directors of the transport company, Yellow Jersey Logistics, confirmed that the cops who stopped the truck were actually impersonating crime intelligence. Then, regular 101111 SAPS response vehicles got dispatched to the scene, basically interrupting the rogue cops mid-heist.
The advocate's theory is that Witness I and his specialized CNEB unit were only called in retroactively as a frantic cover story, just to make it look like a sanctioned, official bust once the regular police showed up.
Now, if you know anything about criminal syndicates, you'll recognize this behavior instantly. It mirrors a well-known tactic called the rip-on, rip-off system. Basically, cartels piggyback their illicit drugs onto legitimate transport containers, and then intercept the trucks to retrieve their own goods before the final destination. The fact that off-duty police officers were seemingly executing this exact playbook raises some horrifying suspicions. Were they acting as statutory law enforcement at all, or were they operating as a rival cartel seizing another syndicate's payload?
And that takes us right into Section 4, Extortion and Brass Interference, where we start uncovering the systemic rot.
Because if you're hoping Ayrton was just a one-off, I've got bad news. Witness I's testimony outlined a chilling timeline of high-level interference that actively hindered his team's work. We're looking at events stretching from a major August 2024 organized crime firearms bust in Sun City all the way to a highly concerning extortion attempt in early 2025. Let's break down exactly what happened. So according to the transcript, a senior officer, Brigadier Mokoena, roped Witness I into a seriously unethical meeting. Mokoena essentially took a perfectly lawful arrest made by the TOMS unit of a dangerous suspect known as John Wick and falsely told a businessman named Vusi Kat Matala that it was actually a targeted hit. Mokoena then used this fabricated story to try and extort protection money from the businessman, offering to make the problem disappear for a price.
And to add some weight to this threat, Mokoena claimed he was acting on behalf of a top-secret source sitting right in National Head General Abea's office. But Witness I quickly figured out this was complete nonsense. It was a phantom source, totally fabricated, just to extract thousands of ZAR illicitly from this businessman. Witness I actually noted on the record that he realized he and his colleague were merely being used as props to lend credibility to an extortion racket.
But wait, it goes deeper. The corruption allegedly even extended to protecting illegal mining syndicates. Back during that August 2024 Sun City bust, where Tom successfully arrested 17 suspects and seized 32 firearms, General Mbotho allegedly stepped in directly. He mandated that the Northwest DPCI take over the case, effectively yanking Witness I's highly effective team right off the board. This lines up perfectly with street rumors that a mining rights syndicate boss, a Miss Mpowe, was paying monthly protection fees to senior officers. General Mbotho even showed up at the TOMS office later purely to issue threats, explicitly forbidding them from operating outside of Gauteng or interfering with these lucrative syndicates.
So I want to leave you with a pretty sobering, provocative thought today. When the forensic, sworn evidence presented at a national commission suggests that elite intervention units are out here running extortion rackets, fabricating intelligence, and literally stealing cartel shipments right off the trucks, who is truly upholding the law in South Africa? If the line between statutory law enforcement and organized crime gets this blurry, who is truly guarding the guards? Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer, and we'll catch you next time as we continue to decode the facts.